Hey everybody, we just want to welcome you to this Google Hangout that we're doing today. We have been getting some questions. We've been doing some webinars lately and we've been getting some questions from different people, a lot of them surrounding Trek, and we want to clarify a couple of things because we know that that's some of the things that are on your hearts and minds right now as you get ready for the next Trek season. We also got a few other questions, but mostly today we're going to focus on the Trek Bible Reading Summaries and how that Bible reading plan works and what you're supposed to do. And where you can get the summaries and all those components. So let's jump right in. The first thing that you need to know is that the Trek Bible Reading Summaries are currently a download, and you can download those at gettrek.org/summaries. Gettrek.org/summaries has a button on there. It'll say download. It's really, really simple. It basically, those summaries look like this. Woo! And they have each book of the Bible, key verse, and a summary that includes the author, the date, and some other key components of the information there. This is what the student will need to work through to actually get it done. So we want to make sure that you get these resources before you even start talking about what that looks like. And so we're going to give you a 3-step plan to help you put this Bible reading plan with the Bible reading summaries in place. So once you've got the materials, the first step is this. You need to understand the expectations. The expectations for this Bible reading plan and the Bible summaries that go along with it are that your Trek student will finish in 2 or 3 years, depending on how long you run Trek. They will finish this reading of the New Testament along with reciting a key verse for each book of that of the New Testament, as well as saying a summary to you of the New Testament book that they're working through. All of that is outlined, actually, and you can see it right here in the back of the book. Here's the 2-year reading plan with each book of the Bible broken down so you know if I'm doing it in 2 years, these are the books we're suggesting. You see that it's got space for an initial, and then at the end of the year it has space for a signature. And we'll talk about how to get that sign-off here in a second, but what I want you to see is the expectations are clearly delineated in the back. In fact, it says at the top, in order for a leader to initial, you need to have read the book, completed the summary, and recited the key verse. Those are the 3 parts that they need to do to get the sign-off. And that's crucial to the next step, which is how to get the sign-off. Those 3 things have to be completed before you initial in this back of the book. Now, if they do 3 years, the 3-year one is here, and it breaks it down in 3 years so that you can see exactly what you're supposed to do. Now, when we say read the entire book, we do not mean skim it. We do not mean just read the key verses. We do not mean read the headers. We mean read the entire book, start to finish. So if you're going to read the book of John, you're going to read every single chapter and every single verse in it. Students need to know that that's an important part for us, that we want them reading the whole book. They're going to memorize the key verse, and the key verse is actually listed on these summaries. So for instance, for Matthew, right here, it says the key verse is Matthew 16, 15, and 16. Most of these key verses will be ones that they know fairly well. They're fairly simple. They're not 5 verses at a time. They're fairly to the point, and they probably already know a lot of these verses to begin with. We did not, so we're clear on memorizing and reading these books. This list is in the order that the New Testament books normally come in. You can choose to have your students, and they can do it in any order that they want because we want them to complete it the best way they know how. However, we are very clearly suggesting a way of reading here. The reason that we split it up this way is because let's say you tried to start reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You would have read pretty much more chapters if you read just the 4 Gospels than you're going to read in the rest of the New Testament. It'll feel like, man, I read 4 books. I have 23 more to go. I didn't get a whole lot done this year. So we split the Gospels up. You'll see that we usually put in a 2-year, we put 2 Gospels in one and 2 Gospels in another. We put some bigger books like Hebrews and Corinthians and Revelation. We split those up as well so that it came out to a fairly even in a 2-year plan and in a 3-year plan, a fairly even number of chapters. We don't want them overwhelmed by that. As they say those key verses, remember to keep them to section standards like they normally. You get 2 helps. A help is any hint that brings them along, whether that's making faces or giving them words or jumping around or drawing them pictures, whatever it is. No more than 2 helps per section. No more than 2 helps per key verse of a book. And that's consistent with what you've been told all along for all the rest of the sections that you're working on throughout Trek. The last thing that you need to recognize is that they need to say the Bible book summary. Now, they need to say this in their own words. What we mean by that is it needs to include the theme and the author and the date, characters, so that they can get a sense of what is this big thing about. Now, there's some people that debate whether or not it's the best thing for them to recite it, to memorize it exactly as it's written in this download, that they can memorize this actual whole thing right here and just say it word for word, or if they should say the summary. Now, I personally prefer that they say the summary in their own words, because that way they've internalized it, they've figured out how to say it for themselves. And the other thing that we've noticed when we've let them not just straight memorize it, but kind of summarize it for themselves, is that they actually wind up saying a lot more than's in here. They saw things when they were reading through it. They saw things that were important characters. This is a summary, and we wanted to make sure that it's concise and to the point, but they may add things to that. There's nothing wrong with that. That means they understood the book at a deeper level than just a concise statement. There may be things that were personally important to them, and when they say those things, ask them, why did you bring that up? It's not in here. Why did you bring up Daniel or this particular part of Daniel? What struck you there? What happened? And Daniel's not a good example, obviously, because we're talking about New Testament, but if you read Acts, there was a part of Acts that they brought up, this particular little story in there. Why did that matter? Why did it matter in Revelation that it says this particular thing to this church? Why did that stand out to you? This is a moment for you to be able to dig deeper with your students when you see that they're internalizing some things about the Scripture that are not just off the page. Pay attention when they do those kind of things. The other thing is, we are asking you every week in every single unit of this book to ask your students how they're doing with their Bible reading plan. So at the bottom of the page it says, are you on track? How are you doing? Ask them every week. That doesn't mean that you're going to sign something off in the back of this book. It means that you ask them, are you keeping up with it? Because what we don't want to see is they get to the end of the year and they say, oh no, I actually have to do all of this in a month. That's too much work. They need to find ways to pace themselves because we want them to develop the practice of reading the Bible on a regular basis. On top of that, the third thing that you need to be able to do is develop a plan. How are you going to transition this? So let me give you my 2 principles that should help a little bit. The first one is this. They need to complete the work as the student, received it. So we have a whole bunch of Trek students who are going into Journey this year. They're going to complete the Journey requirements to do all of the reading of the Old and New Testament and the summaries just like they have in the past. We're not going to try and say, okay, now we're going to jump all this ahead and you got to do it all in this next 4 years. It's too much. They didn't receive it that way. That's not the expectation they've been operating under for the last couple of years. You need to just let them do the Journey Bible summaries, the entire Bible, but the Journey Bible summaries just as they have it right now. For Trek students who have 2 years left, that's fairly simple. You just do the 2-year plan. Even if you run it 3 years, just run the 2-year plan so that they can get through the New Testament before they finish Trek. The one area that's going to be a transition and we know is going to cause some issues, and we want to leave it up to your discretion on how you solve this problem, but we want to give you some suggestions, is those students who have 1 year left in Trek and are trying to finish, they want to start with this new book, they want to get into the new book, but they only have 1 year to do all of the Bible reading for the entire New Testament. So let me give you a couple of suggestions. They need to know that from this point forward, to get a meritorious award, you have to complete all of the New Testament Bible reading summary components. That means reading the book, saying the verse, saying the summary. Those 3 components from this point forward need, for new Trek students and for existing Trek students, that's what they need to do to get a meritorious award. That's the requirement. That's fairly simple. It's fairly easy and straightforward. Here's what we're suggesting you do. If you have 1 year left with your Trek student, have them read as much of the New Testament and say as many summaries and as many key verses as possible. They can carry this over into Journey, but we're suggesting that the more they get finished, the better off they'll be. Um, Now, that means that they may finish 17 or 18, and we know that means they have 9 left. They can do those 9 in Journey. That's okay, because the second principle is this: to finish all of the Bible readings, the summaries, and read the entire book and say the verses, the key verses, before they finish Journey. Just get it done before you finish high school. We know that this 1 year is going to be the transition. From this point forward, it will be fairly easy. All the students who have 2 years left, they're okay. It's just this 1 year that becomes the problem. Now, you're going to have to develop the transition plan that works best for your church. So if you want to push for them to do the whole thing in 1 year, that's fine. If you want to push for them to do 1 year and you can push the second year into Journey, that's fine. We're going to leave it up to your discretion, because at the end of the day, you decide when they finish what you've assigned them to do. But we want them as quickly as possible engaging not only in the Bible reading and the summaries, but the key verses as well. So my encouragement to you, my push to you, is every new student you have in Trek this year, every current student you have in Trek this year, starts jumping into this Bible reading plan and beginning to use it. Whether they finish half of it, whether they finish all of it, whatever you come up with as a plan for your church, get them started. Because they're going to have to finish the rest of it in Journey, and the more they finish this year, the better off they'll be. Does that make sense? If you have questions and you want to kick it back, then please let us know. But Jonathan's here with me, and Jonathan got a couple other questions that we wanted to follow up on as well. If there's other things that are still confusing, or you're still trying to figure out how do we create this plan, please let me know. Right now, my expectation, there were some Journey questions that came in to us as we've been doing webinars, is what do we do with Journey students this coming year? Because Journey students are supposed to have new key verses. Is that going to happen this year or not? So let me answer that one first before Jonathan kicks in with some questions. The answer is no. Journey students didn't receive that. We're not going to kick in memory verses until this first group of Trek students becomes Journey students. And then they will need to do it. I know that's going to create a gap and a transition for your Journey students as well. I get that. But again, your students need to do the work as they received it. They need to be able to work through the process. Now, if you want to make the process that they have to do all of the Bible reading for this first year of Trek students, they have 1 year left, and you want to say, look, I just want to continue on the same plan. They're just going to do it all in Journey. That's your call. Again, I'm saying you have to make a transition plan for your own church, but I'm suggesting that's not the best way to go. I really want them engaged in the Bible reading and saying the verses as quickly as possible. The truth is, we don't keep track. There's no list here that tells us, okay, this person's here. There's nothing that you guys send us every year with a record card for every single student. You guys are keeping track of which award they should get. That applies to both Trek and to Journey. You keep track of how this plan goes. You make sure that it makes sense to you. If you have questions, we'll do our best to answer them. But at the end of the day, we have always and will always leave it in your hands to fulfill the requirements as you see work best for your students in your church. You know the requirements. You've been doing this for a while. This isn't that complicated. I want you to understand that we're not here to try and make your life more difficult. We want to see students engaging God's Word on a regular basis so that they come to know, love, and serve Jesus better. Jonathan, what other questions do you have for me?
Yeah, I got a few other questions, and for those watching, if you want to ask a question, there's a little place on the Google Hangout page where you can type in a question, and we'll get to it. First question: the number of lessons for the Trek one is more than the older Trek books. I'm not sure that we'll be able to have time to get through all 28 lessons in the Awana season. Are all the lessons required for the Milestone Award or the Meritorious Award, or are some optional?
That's a great question. Well, let me clarify a couple of things first. One, Awana has been moving for a while. It did so in Cubbies, and we're going to continue to do so to 32 lessons, largely because we've done the math. We know that if you start the first week of September and you run all the way through the last week of April, and you only take a 2-week break for Christmas, which is what we found to be a standard across the country, there are more than 32 weeks to get that done. Now, if you start later, like mid-September, and you finish earlier, like early April, late March, yeah, you're going to run out of time. The people that we seem to have have been having the most problems lately in our experience are people who run a group on Sunday, because Sunday you generally wind up losing another Sunday on break over Christmas and New Year's. You also wind up losing one for the Super Bowl. You can't run because there's so much going on at your church. There's all kinds of different things that happen on Sunday. If you run late, you get to Mother's Day. That usually cancels something because we have people hanging out when they're with their moms all day, and we totally get that. So what I want to make clear is we know how much time is there, but we also know that there are differing scenarios, that different people have different things that they have to get done. Here's my clarification on this. So yes, all 28 lessons are expected. You need to do all 28 lessons. If that means that you host an extra group, if that means that you have some students who work through it and you kind of do one Wednesday and one Sunday, if that means you host one over break where they just get together and hang out and do something, fine. There are 32 lessons in there, and for those 4 lessons that are reviews, you can do those pretty much however you used to do the Oasis. So the Oasis was the end review unit at the end of everything where they had to say all the verses that they'd already been learning. If you did those with another lesson, you just combined them because you weren't running out of space and time, then that's what you should do for to cut that number from 32 down to 28. That's perfectly acceptable. But they need to finish the entire book. So yes, the answer is they need to finish the entire book in whatever space and time you can make that work for them. If that means maybe you start a week earlier than your normal club does, if that means that you meet on a different night or you add a couple extras in. I'm not telling you how to finish the book. I'm just telling you that you need to if you want to finish the milestone award or the meritorious award or the citation award. So yes, you do need to finish all 28 lessons and the reviews. But you can do the reviews along with another lesson. We just thought it was a really awesome idea to make each review its own lesson because the people that do have the time that we've been talking to, which is quite a few of you, are really excited about the capacity to use that as a transition to help the students not only remember what they're learning, but lead them into the next unit that they're headed into. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. The next question I have is, do you have to use the entire Awana program to use Trek?
No, absolutely not. We have churches that are using Trek as their middle school resource. They are not looking to get awards. They're not looking to do all the other components. They are just using Trek because they think it's an awesome way to help their students grow in their faith, to help students discuss their faith and work it out. So no, Trek could be used standalone by any youth ministry anywhere. It's not something that has to be. Now, if you're trying to get those awards, if you're trying to get to the meritorious or citation to get a scholarship, you're going to have to complete all of the requirements, just like Awana's been saying, from Awana clubs all the way up. But if you're just looking for a youth ministry solution that will basically allow you to reach out and help middle schoolers, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders grow in their faith, Trek is an amazing thing that we're just so excited to see how God is using.
Cool. Another question. Since we are already planning schedules for next year, will there still be a Trek check or something similar for the new students?
Yes, there is a new Trek check. Now, let me clarify something. It's new in the sense that it's got new visuals. The content inside the Trek check is exactly the same as the old Trek check. So if you have old Trek checks, you don't need to throw them away. You can keep them, use them until you get rid of them, and then when you're finished, buy the new ones. The new ones were just revisualized to go along so that they had a visual look and feel like the current books. They're green, they look awesome, they tie into some of this stuff, but the content's the same because the content's only about 2 or 3 years old. We actually wrote those a couple of years ago, and we're leaning into that same content now. They do need to do a Trek check at the beginning of their first year. So whenever they get started, whether they come in the middle of the year, whenever that is, they need to start with the Trek check. And the reason for that isn't because we think it's so important that you always have, you know, some sense of, okay, well, they got to have something to start with. The reason is because, truthfully, we want every student who comes to your Trek group to hear the gospel. Every student needs to hear the gospel, and that's what the Trek check is about. It's helping the students understand the gospel. But let me give you a little tip. Often, we see that leaders are the ones who are handing the Trek check to a student and either letting them read through it or trying to explain their way through it. I want to encourage you to give that Trek check to the friend that brought them or a seasoned Trek student, somebody who's been around a little while, to actually use the Trek check to share their faith with the new student, to share their faith with their friend. Because here's the thing. When I ask students why they don't share their faith more often, you know what they usually tell me? I don't really know what to say. I haven't had any practice. I don't feel comfortable with this. You give that Trek check to a middle school student and let them start sharing their faith with their friends or with a new kid who just showed up. They're going to start practicing. Now, you can hang out and kind of act in some ways as a safety net if they've got questions. I don't know how to answer this. You can help them. But this is a safe environment for them to learn. And the other thing that we found is that with new students always think it's a little odd that an adult comes in and says, here's what's happening, heaven and hell. It gets a little intimidating. Someone who is their age, who is explaining it in their language, usually does a better job. Let your students share their faith and let the new students hear about the gospel, the Trek check. Let them hear about the gospel from someone their own age, someone who can speak in their language and help them understand what's really going on and what they really believe. So yes, the answer is yes, you need to do a Trek check.
Cool. Other question, is there a role book for student leaders?
There is not a role book for student leaders, but there is, if you haven't found it, on our digital library, and we can post that to Facebook here this afternoon, there is a book that we produced on being a student leader, and it basically not only gives some sense for the leader of what the requirements and expectations should be, but also gives a sense for the student of what that role looks like and what it can look like. It opens a lot of opportunity for leaders to see that a student leader isn't just somebody who sits and listens to kids say verses all the time, although that's a fantastic thing that they do. It isn't just somebody who runs game time, although that's a component that they can do. That it can be even just walking in the entryway and greeting people. It can be all kinds of different components of leadership based on the gifts that the students have. But that ebook is free, and we'll post that to Facebook this afternoon so that you can see it. And in it, it also has I believe it has a checklist and a contract, a sample contract between you and the leader, the student leader, so that the student leader knows what they're getting into, and you've clearly outlined what your expectations are, so that later you can hold them accountable and say, this is how we think you did, and this is how we think you should have done. I've even seen people who will do an annual review based on that contract, who will sit down with student leaders at the end of the year and just say, so here's what we saw, here's how we'd rate it, here's the things we need you to improve on next year, and here's some things that we're just so excited and just want to celebrate with you and tell you how much we appreciate you and how proud of you we are for the growth that we've seen in you this last year. And the groups that I've seen that happen with, the students, it's amazing how much they crave someone to help them understand how to get better. And too often we take that lightly and we just kind of move on and go, oh, they're fine, they know what they're doing. We as humans crave not only somebody to know us, but somebody to help us become the people that we want to be. And good leaders will do that for their students on a regular basis. Other questions?
That's it for questions, but I have a question.
Okay, John's got a question.
For me and for other people who have not seen the new Trek materials, that book that you're holding up, is that the Trek Leader Guide, or is that the student workbook?
This is the student's book. The Leader Guide actually has a spiral bound, and it's much bigger. It's 8.5 by 11, so it's a much bigger book. The student's book is 8.5 by 11 landscape.
Very cool.
We're just having so much fun with this because in fact, I'm coming to see Jonathan soon, so I'll bring you one. But the paper in this is so amazing because it's built literally just to mess it up, to be able to see, like, okay, I can write this down and it's not going to bleed through the page because it's thick enough that it's made to even paste things to, and it's not going to fall apart. We try to pick something so that these students could live in this book on a regular basis, and it came out beautiful. Our art director, Hannah, did a fantastic job, and all the stuff that Chris worked on. Here, you want to see some other stuff? If you haven't seen it yet, here, let's give you a... I love this one. This is one of my favorites.
That's cool.
So, and each one of these lessons is themed, so it kind of keeps going on throughout. So you can see, if you look really close, you actually put snakeskin throughout the lesson, like the snake is crawling everywhere. which hopefully will just make your kids think about that metaphor quite a bit. So, but yeah, all these are custom illustrations. She did a fantastic job, and we're really excited to get this out there. We already know that some of you have gotten it, and we know that some of you are still waiting for it. We apologize if anything's on back order. We know that there were apparently some production issues that we didn't anticipate or know about. We got everything in on our deadlines, and then some production things came up, but those are shipping soon, and you know that the stuff's here because I have one in my hand. So it's coming. We will get it to you as soon as we possibly can. But we're really excited for you to get it in your hands and start playing with it as well. So, any other questions?
Doesn't look like we have any other more questions for today.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, I just want to once again, as always, say thank you for the time you're investing in your students. If you have more questions, please post them, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with the next Google Hangout. But God bless, and thank you for all you're doing. Take care.